There are moments in life when the heart feels unsettled without a clear reason. You move forward, you fulfill responsibilities, you maintain routines, yet inside, there is a quiet sense that something is missing. Decisions feel heavier than usual. Thoughts become repetitive. Peace seems harder to maintain. In those moments, the soul begins to search for direction, even if the mind has not fully admitted it. This is where the message of Psalm 23 becomes deeply relevant. Written by David, a man who experienced both victory and adversity, this passage reveals a profound truth about guidance, trust, and divine presence. David did not write these words from a place of comfort alone. He wrote them from a life shaped by challenges, uncertainty, and dependence on God. His understanding of God as a shepherd came from experience, not theory. When life feels uncertain, the human tendency is to rely on personal strength, logic, or external validation. Yet these sources often fail to provide lasting clarity. What the heart truly needs is guidance that goes beyond temporary answers. It needs a steady presence that leads, protects, and restores from within. The concept of God as a shepherd introduces a relationship built on trust. A shepherd does not simply observe from a distance. A shepherd leads, provides, corrects, and stays close to the one being guided. This image reflects a divine care that is attentive and intentional in every detail of life. As this prayer begins, it is important to pause and recognize your current state without judgment. You may feel overwhelmed, uncertain about the future, or simply in need of clarity. This is not a sign of weakness. It is an invitation to reconnect with guidance that is already available to you. Through this moment, your heart is being invited to slow down, to release internal tension, and to become receptive to direction that brings peace, rather than confusion. The journey ahead is not about forcing answers. It is about allowing yourself to be led. And the first step in that process begins with acknowledging a reality that many experience, but rarely express out loud. When the heart feels lost and needs direction, feeling lost is not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it appears quietly, through a sense of disconnection from purpose, a lack of clarity in decisions, or a subtle emptiness that follows you even during productive days. You continue to function, but internally there is a question that remains unresolved. Where am I truly going, and why does it feel like something is missing? This condition can arise from many sources. Life transitions, unanswered expectations, prolonged stress, or simply moving forward without intentional reflection can all contribute to this internal state. Over time, the absence of direction begins to affect not only emotions, but also focus, motivation, and confidence. David understood this condition in a spiritual sense. In Psalm 23, he acknowledges the need for a shepherd, someone who provides direction when personal vision is limited. This acknowledgement is not a statement of defeat. It is a declaration of awareness. Recognizing the need for guidance is the beginning of receiving it. When the heart feels lost, it often tries to compensate by overthinking or attempting to control outcomes. However, these responses rarely bring lasting peace. Instead, they can increase internal pressure and create a cycle of uncertainty. The more the mind tries to solve everything alone, the more exhausting the process becomes. At this point, the invitation is to shift perspective. Instead of viewing this moment as confusion, begin to see it as a signal that your life is ready to receive clearer direction, a signal that you are being guided toward a deeper reliance on something greater than your own understanding. The feeling of being lost does not define your identity. It simply reveals that your current approach may need alignment. Direction is not always found through more effort. Often it is discovered through stillness, awareness, and openness to guidance that comes from beyond your immediate perspective. This is where the role of the shepherd becomes essential. A shepherd does not wait for perfect conditions to guide the flock. The guidance is continuous, even when the path is not fully visible. Trust becomes the bridge between uncertainty and clarity. As you reflect on this, consider that the feeling of being lost may actually be the beginning of being led. The awareness of uncertainty opens the door to a different kind of confidence, one that is not based on self-reliance alone, but on trust in divine direction. And once the heart acknowledges this need for guidance, it becomes ready to recognize something deeper. A presence that does not speak loudly, but consistently leads in ways that bring peace, clarity, and assurance. The voice of the shepherd that calls in silence. The guidance of God is not always accompanied by noise, urgency, or visible signs. In many cases, it comes through stillness, subtle awareness, and an inner conviction that does not demand attention, but gently directs the heart. Understanding this requires sensitivity, because the human mind is often conditioned to look for dramatic answers, while divine guidance often operates in a quiet and consistent way. In the midst of daily life, there are countless voices competing for attention. Opinions, expectations, responsibilities, and internal thoughts create a constant stream of information. Within this environment, the voice of the shepherd does not compete for dominance. Instead, it invites the heart into a state of calm where clarity can be recognized. The Holy Bible in the Book of Psalms reflects moments where David experienced God's presence not through external spectacle, but through deep inner assurance. This type of guidance is not forced. It becomes noticeable when the heart is willing to slow down and listen beyond the surface level of thoughts and emotions. The voice of the shepherd often aligns with peace rather than confusion. It does not create anxiety or pressure. Instead, it brings a sense of stability, even when the situation itself remains unresolved. This internal peace acts as a confirmation that the direction being considered is aligned with something greater. Learning to recognize this voice requires practice and awareness. It involves paying attention to moments when a certain decision feels calm and grounded, even if it is not the easiest option. It also involves noticing when something creates internal tension or unrest, which may indicate a lack of alignment. David's understanding of God as a shepherd implies a relationship built on familiarity. The more time is spent in reflection, prayer, and connection, the more recognizable this guidance becomes. It is not about hearing audible instructions. It is about developing an inner sensitivity that distinguishes between distraction and direction. Silence plays an important role in this process. When the mind is constantly occupied, it becomes difficult to perceive subtle guidance. Creating moments of quiet allows the heart to become more receptive. In that space, clarity begins to emerge without force. The shepherd does not rush the process. Guidance unfolds gradually, allowing trust to grow alongside understanding. This approach builds confidence over time because the direction received is not dependent on external pressure, but on internal confirmation. As this awareness develops, the heart begins to shift from seeking control to recognizing guidance. Instead of reacting impulsively, there is a growing tendency to pause, reflect, and discern. This transformation is subtle but powerful, as it changes the way decisions are made and how challenges are approached. This realization leads naturally to a deeper understanding of how David himself came to depend on this guidance. His journey was not defined by comfort, but by experiences that shaped his trust in God as his shepherd. And that journey reveals a path that begins in isolation, but leads to a deeper connection with divine direction. David's journey from isolation to divine guidance. David's relationship with God was not formed in moments of comfort alone. It was shaped through seasons of isolation, responsibility, and challenges that required him to depend on a source beyond his own strength. Before becoming a king, David spent years in environments where solitude was part of his daily experience. As a shepherd, he learned to care for sheep in open fields, away from the recognition of others, relying on patience, vigilance, and consistency. These early experiences were not insignificant. They trained David to recognize the importance of guidance, protection, and attentiveness. In isolation, he developed awareness. In silence, he developed sensitivity. In responsibility, he developed trust. These elements contributed to his understanding of God, not as a distant presence but as an active shepherd involved in every detail of life. The Holy Bible, in the book of Psalms, reflects David's internal transformation over time. His words reveal a progression from external observation to deep personal reliance. The declaration of God as his shepherd in Psalm 23 is not theoretical. It is rooted in lived experience, where trust was tested and refined through real situations. Isolation often presents itself as a challenge, but it can also become a space for growth. Without constant external distractions, the heart has the opportunity to reflect, evaluate, and develop a stronger internal foundation. David's time alone did not disconnect him from purpose. It prepared him for it. In moments of isolation, many people may feel disconnected or uncertain. However, from a spiritual perspective, these moments can serve as preparation for deeper alignment with God's guidance. When external noise is reduced, internal awareness increases. This allows the individual to become more receptive to divine direction. David's journey also demonstrates that divine guidance is not limited to specific environments. Whether in solitude or in leadership, in simplicity or in responsibility, God remained present. The consistency of that presence is what shaped David's confidence in declaring that the Lord is his shepherd. This understanding transforms how one views personal seasons of life. Isolation is no longer seen solely as absence, but as an opportunity for connection to deepen. It becomes a setting where trust can be developed without distraction, where faith can grow without external validation, and where awareness of God's presence can become more tangible. David's experience reveals that guidance often begins in places where dependence is unavoidable. In those moments, the heart learns to look beyond immediate circumstances and recognize a steady presence that does not change with conditions. This journey from isolation to divine guidance illustrates a principle that applies beyond David's life. It shows that clarity often emerges when the heart learns to rely less on external certainty and more on the consistent presence of God. And from this understanding, a deeper question naturally arises. What does it truly mean to be guided by God in everyday life, beyond moments of difficulty or transition? Understanding what it means to be led by God. Being guided by God is not limited to extraordinary moments or life-changing decisions. It is a continuous process that influences thoughts, attitudes, choices, and responses in everyday life. Many people associate divine guidance only with major crossroads, but in reality, it operates consistently in both small and significant situations. To be led by God means to live with awareness that your steps are not random. There is direction available that aligns your actions with purpose, wisdom, and peace. This guidance does not remove responsibility. Instead, it enhances clarity, helping you make decisions with confidence rather than confusion. The Holy Bible, in the book of Proverbs, teaches that those who trust in the Lord should not rely solely on their own understanding. This does not imply that personal reasoning is unnecessary, but rather that it should be complemented by divine direction. Human understanding has limits, while God's perspective encompasses what is seen and unseen. In practical terms, being led by God involves a willingness to pause before acting, to reflect before deciding, and to remain open to correction or redirection. It requires humility, because guidance often challenges assumptions and invites a broader perspective than immediate reasoning can provide. This kind of guidance also brings consistency. Instead of reacting differently in each situation based on emotions alone, a person who seeks God's direction develops a stable internal reference point. This stability helps maintain balance during uncertainty and prevents impulsive decisions that may lead to regret. Being led by God also influences priorities. What once seemed urgent may no longer hold the same weight when viewed through spiritual awareness. Decisions begin to reflect values such as integrity, patience, and long-term alignment rather than short-term convenience. This process is gradual. It develops through practice, reflection, and continued connection with God. Over time, the ability to recognize divine direction becomes more natural. The heart becomes familiar with the difference between actions driven by emotion and those guided by peace. Another important aspect is trust. Being led requires confidence that the direction received is reliable, even when it does not immediately make sense. Trust grows as experiences confirm that following this guidance leads to outcomes marked by clarity and stability. Living under divine guidance does not eliminate challenges. Instead, it changes how challenges are experienced. Difficult situations become opportunities to apply wisdom rather than react impulsively. Decisions become more intentional, and responses become more measured. Understanding this concept shifts the perspective from independence to alignment. Life is no longer approached as a series of isolated decisions, but as a continuous journey where each step can be guided with purpose. And as this understanding deepens, a natural tension emerges within the human heart. The desire to control outcomes often conflicts with the invitation to trust the process of being guided. This leads to a necessary step in the journey, releasing the need to control everything and allowing guidance to take its place. Releasing the need to control everything. One of the greatest internal struggles in human life is the desire to control outcomes. The mind seeks certainty, the heart seeks security, and the natural response is to try to manage every detail in order to avoid uncertainty. However, this constant need for control often creates pressure, tension, and emotional exhaustion. Control gives a temporary sense of stability, but it cannot guarantee peace. The more a person tries to hold everything together, the more awareness grows about how limited personal control truly is. Situations change, people react in unexpected ways, and circumstances evolve beyond what can be anticipated. The Holy Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that there is a time for everything under heaven. This teaching highlights the reality that life unfolds according to a broader order that cannot be fully managed by human effort alone. Recognizing this truth opens the door to a different approach, one that is rooted in trust rather than control. Releasing the need to control does not mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means shifting from an attitude of tension to an attitude of trust. Instead of trying to force outcomes, the heart begins to cooperate with guidance that is already available. When control is released, space is created for clarity to emerge. The mind becomes less occupied with worst-case scenarios and more capable of perceiving direction. Emotional energy that was previously consumed by worry becomes available for focus, presence, and intentional action. This release also impacts relationships, decisions, and daily interactions. A person who is not constantly trying to control everything tends to listen more attentively, respond more calmly, and act with greater awareness. This shift improves both internal peace and external outcomes. Letting go of control requires humility. It acknowledges that not everything depends solely on personal effort. It recognizes that guidance, timing, and outcomes may involve factors beyond immediate perception. This acknowledgement does not weaken confidence, it strengthens it, because it aligns the heart with a more stable foundation. The process of releasing control is not instant. It is gradual, and often requires repeated moments of surrender. Each time a situation arises that triggers the desire to control, there is an opportunity to pause, reflect, and choose trust instead. This choice is supported by the understanding that God's guidance is not random. It is intentional and consistent. Trusting that guidance allows the heart to move forward without the burden of needing to predict or manage every outcome. As control is released, a new kind of awareness develops. The heart becomes more attentive to direction rather than resistance. Instead of reacting with urgency, there is a growing capacity to respond with clarity. This transition prepares the heart for moments that are not always clear or easy to understand. Life includes seasons where the path is uncertain, where progress feels slow, and where answers are not immediately visible. And in those moments, trust becomes essential, especially when walking through paths that resemble valleys rather than open roads. Trusting God in uncertain paths and valleys. Life is not always experienced on level ground. There are seasons that feel elevated, where progress is visible and decisions seem clear. However, there are also moments that resemble valleys, where direction is less obvious, emotions feel heavier, and the path ahead appears uncertain. These valley experiences are not unusual. They are part of the human journey and often become defining moments of growth. Walking through uncertain paths can create internal tension. The absence of immediate answers may lead to questions about direction, purpose, and outcome. The mind may attempt to fill the gaps with assumptions, while the heart seeks reassurance that it is not walking alone. The Holy Bible, in Psalm 23, describes the presence of God even in the valley. David does not deny the existence of dark or challenging paths. Instead, he acknowledges that the presence of God remains constant regardless of the environment. This perspective transforms the valley from a place of fear into a place where trust becomes active. Trusting God in uncertain paths requires a shift in focus. Instead of concentrating solely on the lack of visibility, the heart begins to recognize the presence that accompanies every step. This awareness does not eliminate uncertainty, but it changes how uncertainty is experienced. In practical terms, uncertainty often brings a desire for immediate clarity. People want to see the entire path before moving forward. However, divine guidance often reveals only what is necessary for the next step. This requires a willingness to move with partial understanding while maintaining confidence in the direction being provided. Valleys also serve a purpose. They slow down the pace of life, encouraging reflection, dependence, and deeper awareness. In these environments, distractions are reduced, and the heart becomes more attentive to internal guidance. What initially feels like limitation can become an opportunity for spiritual growth and alignment. Trust in these moments is not passive. It is an active decision to continue moving forward despite incomplete information. It involves choosing peace over anxiety, confidence over fear, and reliance on God over self-reliance alone. David's declaration in Psalm 23 reflects a conviction that is not dependent on external conditions. The presence of God is described as a constant companion, providing comfort and direction even in the most challenging circumstances. This understanding allows the heart to remain steady when external stability is not present. Uncertain paths test the depth of trust. They reveal whether confidence is based on visible outcomes or on a deeper assurance that transcends immediate circumstances. Over time, each step taken in trust strengthens the ability to navigate future challenges with greater stability. As trust develops in these valleys, the heart begins to notice something else. Even in ordinary days, provision is present in ways that are often overlooked. Guidance is not limited to difficult seasons. It also appears in the simplicity of everyday life. This realization leads to a deeper awareness of how God provides consistently, not only in moments of crisis, but in the details that shape each day. Recognizing divine provision in everyday life. Divine provision is often associated with moments of urgency, when a need is clearly visible and the solution appears at the right time. However, provision is not limited to extraordinary circumstances. It is present in the continuity of daily life, in ways that are subtle, consistent, and often taken for granted. Each day contains elements that reflect provision: the ability to wake up, the capacity to think clearly, the opportunity to work, the presence of relationships, and the resources needed to continue moving forward are all expressions of care that sustain life. When the heart begins to observe these details with awareness, gratitude naturally begins to grow. The Holy Bible in the Book of Psalms highlights the faithfulness of God in providing for His people. David's perspective reveals that provision is not occasional but ongoing. It is not dependent on dramatic events, but on a continuous relationship with the One who sustains all things. Recognizing provision requires a shift in perception. Instead of focusing only on what seems lacking, the heart begins to notice what is already present. This does not ignore challenges, but it balances awareness by acknowledging the support that already exists. In everyday life, provision may appear through opportunities, insights, timing, or even small adjustments that prevent greater difficulties. These moments often go unnoticed because they do not always present themselves in obvious ways. Yet their impact becomes clear when viewed in retrospect. Gratitude plays an important role in this recognition. When the heart develops the habit of acknowledging what has been provided, it becomes more sensitive to continued guidance. Gratitude opens the mind to a broader understanding of how consistently life is supported. Provision is not only material. It also includes emotional stability, mental clarity, and spiritual encouragement. These elements contribute to overall well-being and influence how a person navigates challenges and decisions. David's experience reflects an awareness that God's care extends beyond specific moments into the entirety of life. This understanding builds confidence that needs will be met, not necessarily in the way expected, but in the way that aligns with purpose and timing. As awareness of provision grows, the heart begins to experience a sense of stability. There is less anxiety about future uncertainties because there is evidence of ongoing support in the present. This stability creates space for rest, both mentally and spiritually. Recognizing provision also strengthens trust. Each instance where support is identified reinforces the understanding that life is not being managed alone. There is a consistent presence that provides, guides, and sustains. With this awareness, the heart becomes more at ease, less focused on scarcity, and more attuned to continuity. This transition naturally leads to a deeper experience of rest, not just physical, but spiritual rest that comes from being in the presence of the shepherd. This rest becomes the next essential aspect of the journey, where the soul finds renewal not through effort, but through presence. Finding rest in the presence of the shepherd. Rest is often misunderstood as the absence of activity. In reality, true rest is not only physical, but deeply spiritual. A person can pause from work and still feel mentally restless, just as someone can be active and yet experience a sense of inner calm. The difference lies in the condition of the heart and its connection to a stable source of peace. In the context of Psalm 23, rest is described as something that occurs under the care of the shepherd. This rest is not dependent on external circumstances being perfect. Instead, it is the result of trust in a presence that provides security, direction, and stability regardless of the environment. Many individuals carry internal tension even during moments of pause. Thoughts continue to circulate, concerns remain active, and the mind struggles to disengage from unresolved matters. This ongoing mental activity prevents the heart from entering a state of true rest. Without a sense of assurance, rest becomes incomplete. The Holy Bible in the Book of Psalms presents the image of being led to places of rest, where the soul is restored. This restoration involves more than relaxation. It includes the renewal of emotional strength, mental clarity, and spiritual alignment. Rest becomes a process of returning to a balanced state, where the heart is no longer overwhelmed. Finding rest in the presence of the shepherd requires intentional awareness. It begins with the decision to slow down internally, to release excessive concerns, and to acknowledge that not everything must be carried personally. This acknowledgement allows space for peace to emerge naturally. The presence of God introduces a sense of stability that is not easily shaken by external conditions. Even when responsibilities remain and challenges persist, The inner state can be calm because it is grounded in trust. This trust reduces internal resistance and allows the mind to settle. Rest also restores perspective. When the heart is at rest, decisions become clearer, emotions become more balanced, and reactions become more measured. This clarity is essential for maintaining consistency in both personal and spiritual life. David's understanding reflects a relationship where guidance and care are constant. The shepherd not only leads but also provides environments where restoration can take place. This reinforces the idea that rest is not something to be forced but something that is received through connection. As the heart experiences this kind of rest, it becomes more receptive to healing. Emotional burdens that were carried for extended periods begin to lose their intensity. Mental fatigue begins to ease, and a sense of renewal starts to take its place. This restoration prepares the heart for a deeper request. A moment where the soul seeks not only rest, but renewal at a deeper level, asking God to restore what has been worn down over time. This leads naturally into a prayer for a renewed and restored soul. Asking God for a renewed and restored soul. There are moments in life when rest is not enough to fully recover what has been worn down internally. Experiences accumulate, emotions become heavy, and the soul begins to feel the weight of unresolved situations. In these moments, what is needed is not only pause but renewal at a deeper level. A renewed soul is one that regains strength, clarity, and stability after periods of fatigue or emotional strain. Restoration involves bringing back what has been diminished, realigning what has been disrupted, and healing what has been affected over time. This process cannot always be achieved through human effort alone, as it touches areas that are beyond surface-level adjustments. The Holy Bible in the Book of Psalms reflects this desire for inner restoration. David expressed a recognition that the soul can be renewed through a connection with God. This renewal is not limited to physical relief, but extends to emotional healing and spiritual rebalancing. When a person turns to God with sincerity, acknowledging the need for restoration, something significant happens within the heart. There is a shift from self-reliance to dependence on divine strength. This shift opens the door for transformation that goes beyond temporary relief. Restoration begins with honesty. Presenting the true state of the heart before God allows the process to start without resistance. This includes acknowledging exhaustion, discouragement, confusion, or any other internal condition that needs attention. Nothing is hidden in this moment of openness. As the soul engages in this kind of prayer, there is an invitation for God to work in areas that may not be fully understood. The process of renewal may not always be immediate or visible in dramatic ways, but it gradually becomes evident through changes in perspective, emotional stability, and inner peace. A restored soul begins to experience alignment again. Thoughts become more organized, emotions become more manageable, and spiritual sensitivity increases. This alignment helps the individual respond to life with greater clarity and composure. David's journey reflects the understanding that restoration is part of a continuous relationship with God. It is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process that supports the believer through different seasons of life. Each moment of renewal builds resilience for what lies ahead. As the soul is restored, there is a renewed capacity to walk forward with intention. This leads to a life that is not only sustained, but guided along paths that reflect purpose and direction. These paths are not random. They are intentionally designed, leading into ways of righteousness that shape both character and destiny. This naturally leads into understanding what it means to walk in paths of righteousness with awareness. Walking in paths of righteousness with awareness. Walking in paths of righteousness is not simply about making isolated correct choices. It is about living with a continuous awareness of direction, values, and alignment with what is right in the sight of God. This kind of walk involves consistency, intention, and sensitivity to guidance that shapes both actions and attitudes. Righteousness in this context reflects a way of living that aligns with divine principles. It influences decisions, behaviors, and priorities. It is not limited to external conduct, but extends to internal motives. A person may appear to follow a path outwardly, but true righteousness begins in the heart, where intentions are formed. The Holy Bible, in the Book of Psalms, presents the idea that God leads along paths that reflect righteousness. This indicates that guidance is not random. It is structured, purposeful, and designed to move a person toward a life that reflects balance, integrity, and spiritual clarity. Awareness plays a crucial role in this journey. Without awareness, a person may move forward without recognizing whether the direction aligns with what is right. Awareness allows for reflection, correction, and adjustment when necessary. It keeps the heart attentive to subtle guidance and inner conviction. Walking in righteousness requires a willingness to remain teachable. Situations in life often reveal areas that need refinement. Through these experiences, the individual gains understanding and grows in maturity. This growth strengthens the ability to make decisions that are consistent with a righteous path. David's example demonstrates that this walk is guided by trust. The shepherd leads in ways that may not always be immediately understood, yet they are ultimately directed toward good. Trust allows a person to continue moving forward, even when the full picture is not visible. There are moments when choices must be made without complete information. In these situations, awareness of divine guidance becomes essential. This awareness is often experienced through inner peace, clarity of thought, and alignment between conviction and action. Righteous paths also involve discipline. Staying aligned requires consistency in habits, thoughts, and priorities. Small daily decisions contribute to the overall direction of life. Over time, these decisions form a pattern that reflects either alignment or deviation. As the individual remains aware of guidance, there is a growing sense of stability. The path becomes clearer not because obstacles disappear, but because the ability to navigate them improves. Confidence increases as alignment strengthens. Walking in righteousness also influences relationships, responsibilities, and personal conduct. It creates a framework where choices are not only based on preference, but on principle. This leads to a life that is grounded and intentional. This awareness prepares the heart to face internal challenges, especially fear. Fear often attempts to disrupt clarity and create hesitation. However, the presence of the shepherd provides a foundation that transforms fear into trust. This leads into understanding how the presence of God helps overcome fear. Overcoming fear through the presence of God. Fear is a natural human response when facing uncertainty, danger, or the unknown. It can appear suddenly or develop gradually when the mind begins to anticipate possible outcomes that seem difficult to handle. While fear itself is an emotion, its influence can affect decisions, weaken confidence, and create hesitation in moments that require clarity. In the journey described in Psalm 23, fear is not ignored. Instead, it is addressed through the awareness of presence. The presence of God introduces a perspective that changes how fear is experienced. When the heart becomes conscious that it is not alone, the intensity of fear begins to lose its dominance. The Holy Bible in the Book of Psalms reflects moments where David acknowledges challenges while maintaining trust in divine guidance. This combination of awareness and trust creates a foundation where fear does not control the direction of life. Instead, it is confronted with a deeper sense of assurance. Fear often grows in environments where uncertainty is left unaddressed. The mind tends to fill gaps with assumptions, many of which are based on worst-case scenarios. This process can amplify anxiety and create a sense of instability. However, when the presence of God is acknowledged, the focus shifts from uncertainty to trust. The presence of the shepherd represents guidance, protection, and closeness. This presence is not distant or abstract. It is active and consistent, offering reassurance even in situations that seem overwhelming. The awareness of this presence changes internal dialogue, replacing fear-driven thoughts with trust-based understanding. Overcoming fear does not always mean eliminating the situations that cause it. Instead, it involves developing a response that is grounded in faith rather than reaction. This response allows the heart to remain steady, even when circumstances are unclear. David's confidence was not based on the absence of challenges, but on the certainty of divine companionship. This understanding allowed him to move forward without being paralyzed by fear. The same principle applies when the heart learns to recognize that guidance is continuous. Fear loses influence when it is no longer the primary reference point for decisions. When trust in God becomes central, fear is placed in a secondary position. It may still be present, but it no longer dictates actions or outcomes. The presence of God also brings peace that surpasses logical understanding. This peace does not depend on external conditions aligning perfectly. Instead, it emerges from an internal assurance that is rooted in trust and relationship. As this awareness strengthens, the individual begins to experience greater stability in moments that previously triggered fear. Decisions become clearer, reactions become calmer, and the overall sense of control shifts from external circumstances to internal trust. This transformation prepares the heart to become more attentive to subtle guidance in everyday decisions. Fear no longer clouds perception, allowing the individual to recognize direction more clearly. This leads into learning how to recognize spiritual guidance in daily decisions. Learning to recognize spiritual guidance in daily decisions. Spiritual guidance is often associated with major life choices, but in reality, it is present in the small, ordinary decisions that shape everyday life. Recognizing this guidance requires attentiveness, discernment, and a heart that is open to subtle direction rather than expecting only obvious signs. Many decisions are made automatically, driven by habit, emotion, or external influence. While some of these choices are neutral, others can benefit from a deeper level of awareness. When a person begins to pause and reflect before acting, space is created to sense whether a decision aligns with a greater sense of peace and clarity. The Holy Bible in the Book of Psalms reflects the idea that God provides direction to those who seek Him. This guidance is not always presented in dramatic or visible ways. Instead, it often appears as an inner conviction, a sense of peace, or a clarity that distinguishes one option from another. Learning to recognize spiritual guidance involves developing sensitivity. This sensitivity is not based on emotional intensity, but on consistency. Over time, patterns begin to emerge where certain decisions lead to peace, while others create internal tension or uncertainty. This internal response can serve as an indicator. When a decision aligns with guidance, there is often a sense of alignment within the heart. When it does not, there may be a feeling of hesitation or lack of clarity. These internal signals require reflection rather than immediate reaction. David's relationship with God demonstrates a level of trust that allowed him to rely on guidance even when external circumstances were uncertain. This trust was built through experience, where repeated instances of direction reinforced confidence in divine leadership. Recognizing guidance also involves distinguishing between internal noise and true direction. Thoughts can be influenced by fear, pressure, or personal desire. Spiritual guidance, in contrast, tends to bring a sense of calm clarity rather than confusion or urgency. Daily decisions, no matter how small, contribute to the overall direction of life. Choices related to communication, priorities, reactions, and commitments all play a role in shaping outcomes. When these choices are aligned with guidance, they create a path that reflects consistency and purpose. As awareness increases, the process of decision-making becomes more intentional. Instead of acting purely on impulse, there is a moment of consideration that allows guidance to be acknowledged. This habit strengthens over time, becoming a natural part of how decisions are approached. Spiritual guidance is not meant to complicate life, but to simplify it by providing direction that leads to clarity and peace. When followed consistently, it reduces unnecessary conflict and supports a more balanced way of living. With this understanding, the heart becomes more confident in moving forward, supported by a growing sense of trust in divine protection and care. This leads into a declaration of faith in God's protection over life. Declaring faith in God's protection and care. Faith becomes stronger when it is expressed, not only felt internally but declared with conviction. A declaration of faith is an intentional acknowledgement that life is under the care of God, and that His protection is active, consistent, and dependable. This declaration shifts the mindset from uncertainty to assurance. In moments of vulnerability, the human mind often seeks security in visible guarantees. However, faith operates beyond what can be seen. It relies on trust in the character and promises of God, rather than on external conditions. This trust forms the foundation of confidence that remains steady even when circumstances fluctuate. The Holy Bible in the Book of Psalms reflects numerous declarations of trust in divine protection. David often expressed confidence that God was his refuge and shield. These expressions were not based on ideal circumstances, but on a relationship that had been tested through experience. Declaring faith is not merely repetition of words. It is an alignment between belief and expression. When the heart truly believes in divine protection, the words spoken carry meaning and reinforce that belief internally. This alignment strengthens conviction and reduces internal conflict. Fear and doubt tend to weaken when confronted with consistent declarations of trust. By affirming belief in God's care, the mind is redirected away from anxious thoughts and toward stability. This does not eliminate challenges, but it changes the way they are perceived and approached. David's confidence illustrates that protection is not always visible in the moment, but becomes evident over time through preservation, guidance, and support in critical situations. This understanding builds a deeper level of trust that is not easily shaken by temporary difficulties. Declaring faith also influences emotional responses. When the heart is anchored in the awareness of protection, reactions to stress become more measured. There is less tendency to panic and more ability to respond with clarity. This declaration can be expressed in personal prayer, where the individual acknowledges God's covering over their life, their decisions, and their path. This acknowledgement reinforces the understanding that life is not faced alone, but under continuous care. As this faith is consistently declared, it begins to shape perspective. Challenges are no longer seen as threats without support, but as situations that are within the scope of divine oversight. This perspective brings a sense of stability that strengthens resilience. Confidence grows not because difficulties disappear, but because the assurance of protection remains constant. This assurance allows the heart to move forward without hesitation, trusting that guidance and care are present in every step. This confidence prepares the individual to advance with peace, even in the face of uncertainty, knowing that direction is already established under divine leadership. This leads into receiving confidence to move forward with peace. Receiving confidence to move forward with peace. Moving forward in life often requires stepping into situations that are not fully known or completely predictable. This uncertainty can create hesitation, especially when past experiences, fears, or doubts attempt to influence present decisions. Confidence in this context is not the absence of uncertainty, but the presence of trust that allows progress despite it. Peace is a defining element of this confidence. It is not a temporary feeling dependent on circumstances, but a stable internal condition that remains even when external factors change. When peace is present, the heart is not easily disturbed by what is unclear, because it is anchored in something greater than immediate understanding. The Holy Bible, in the Book of Psalms, reflects a deep sense of trust in God's guidance. David's confidence was not built on control over outcomes but on assurance in the one who directs the path. This assurance allowed him to move forward with stability, even when the full picture was not visible. Receiving confidence begins with releasing the need for complete certainty before taking action. Many people delay progress because they wait for every question to be answered. However, in spiritual guidance, clarity often comes through movement, not before it. Taking steps forward while trusting in direction allows understanding to develop along the way. Peace emerges when the heart accepts that it is being guided. This acceptance reduces internal conflict and creates alignment between thought, intention, and action. When there is alignment, decisions become easier to make, and hesitation begins to decrease. Confidence is strengthened through consistent awareness of divine presence. When a person remains conscious that they are being guided and supported, the mind becomes less susceptible to doubt. This awareness reinforces stability and encourages forward movement. David's example demonstrates that peace is not dependent on the absence of challenges. Instead, it is rooted in trust that sustains the heart through challenges. This trust allows movement without fear of being abandoned or misled. As confidence grows, the individual becomes more willing to take steps that align with purpose. Each step taken in trust reinforces the understanding that guidance is active and reliable. Over time, this builds a pattern of steady progress. Peace also influences the quality of decisions. When the heart is at peace, choices are made with clarity rather than pressure. This leads to outcomes that are more consistent with long-term alignment rather than short-term reactions. Receiving confidence is therefore both a spiritual and internal process. It involves trusting the guidance of God while allowing that trust to transform the way decisions are approached and executed. This state of confidence prepares the heart for a deeper realization, where life itself becomes directed by the presence of the shepherd, leading to meaning, stability, and purpose. This leads into the final reflection on how life finds direction and meaning when God is the shepherd. When God is the shepherd, life finds direction and meaning. There comes a moment in the journey where all the previous reflections converge into a single understanding. Life gains clarity, stability, and purpose when it is guided by God as the shepherd. This is not merely a concept, but a lived reality that transforms how each day is experienced. Without direction, life can feel fragmented, as if decisions are made in isolation without a unifying sense of purpose. Thoughts may drift, priorities may shift, and the heart may struggle to find consistency. In contrast, when guidance is acknowledged, there is a central reference point that brings coherence to thoughts, actions, and intentions. The Holy Bible, in the Book of Psalms, presents this relationship as one of trust and guidance. David expressed confidence that his path was not random, but led by a shepherd who understood both the destination and the process required to reach it. This awareness gave his life a sense of order, even in moments of uncertainty. When God is recognized as the shepherd, life begins to align with a greater structure. Decisions are no longer made solely based on immediate preference, but on a deeper understanding of direction. This alignment reduces internal conflict and creates a sense of continuity between choices. Meaning emerges when life is no longer viewed as a series of disconnected events, but as a guided journey. Each experience, whether challenging or favorable, contributes to growth and understanding. This perspective transforms how situations are interpreted, allowing even difficulties to be seen as part of a larger process. Direction provides clarity, but meaning provides motivation. Together, they create a foundation that supports perseverance. When a person understands where they are being led and why the journey matters, it becomes easier to remain consistent even when progress feels gradual. David's relationship with God reflects this combination of direction and meaning. His trust was not based on immediate outcomes, but on the assurance that his life was under guidance that was purposeful and reliable. This trust allowed him to remain steady through various seasons of life. When the shepherd leads, there is also a sense of protection that accompanies the journey. This protection is not always visible in the moment, but it becomes evident through the preservation of life, the prevention of greater harm, and the provision of what is needed along the way. Life under divine guidance is marked by alignment between inner values and outward actions. There is less fragmentation and more integration. The heart, mind, and decisions begin to operate in harmony, guided by a consistent source of wisdom. This alignment brings peace that is not easily disturbed. Even when external conditions change, the internal foundation remains stable because it is anchored in something greater than circumstances. Ultimately, when God is the shepherd, life is no longer defined by uncertainty alone, but by direction, meaning, and purpose. The journey becomes one of trust, where each step is guided, each moment is meaningful, and each path leads toward a greater understanding of life under divine care.